Have you ever wondered if you could just hit a reset button on the brain? Especially a brain caught in the grip of addiction. Well, today, we're diving into the incredible science behind psilocybin, a compound that might just offer that kind of reset. It's a fascinating story.
I mean, really think about that for a second. The cycle of addiction can feel like being stuck on a looping roller coaster you can't get off of. It's this tangled, repetitive pattern of thoughts and behaviors. But what if you could find a way to stop the ride and step off? And this is where things get really interesting. See, psilocybin is entering the conversation. Think of the addicted brain like one of those calm snow globes with a fixed, unchanging scene inside. Psilocybin doesn't just tweak the scene. It's like someone picks up the whole globe and gives it a powerful shake, disrupting everything and allowing all the pieces to settle in a completely new way.
But, to really get how you can break that loop, we've got to understand how it's built in the first place. So let's take a quick look at the neurology of how a brain gets stuck.
Okay, so at its very core, addiction is about the brain being neurologically, stuck. The key phrase here is impaired cognitive flexibility. That's just a scientific way of saying the brain loses its knack for thinking on its feet and adapting. Instead, it gets locked into these super rigid, looping thoughts, a pattern we also see in conditions like depression.
And this picture here shows that cycle perfectly, doesn't it? It starts with a craving, which drives a behavior, which then gives this tiny fleeting moment of relief. But here's the kicker. That relief just makes the next craving even stronger, tightening the loop. The brain gets incredibly efficient at running this one single destructive program, just over and over and over again. So if addiction is basically the brain getting stuck in a rigid pattern, how in the world do you introduce some flexibility? This is where the neurochemistry of psilocybin is, honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing. It's not about trying to erase the old, worn-out path, but about creating the potential for a brand new one.
Well, the secret seems to lie in its ability to temporarily quiet down the very parts of the brain that are holding these rigid patterns in place. We're not talking about wiping memories here, but about creating enough mental space to see those old patterns from a totally fresh perspective.
Okay, this part is just fascinating. We all have this autopilot system in our brain called the default mode network, or DMN for short. It's the part that lights up when your mind is wandering. Thinking about the past, worrying about the future. In addiction, that DMN can get stuck in a really negative loop of craving and self-criticism. What psilocybin does is it dramatically quiets the DMN down. It's like turning the volume way down on that noisy, critical inner voice.
And that leads us to this really key theory called the rebus model. The idea is pretty simple. By quieting that autopilot network, psilocybin relaxes our most deeply held beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about our addiction. By loosening the grip of those old stories, it opens up a space to see things in a whole new light. But just disrupting the old patterns, that's only half the battle. The real magic, the real therapeutic potential comes from what happens next. Because the disruption isn't the cure, it's the opportunity. And this quote from some of the top researchers in the field just sums it up perfectly. Psilocybin opens a therapeutic window. For a little while, the brain becomes more plastic. You can think of it like warm clay, ready to be reshaped. It's this critical but temporary window of opportunity to build new, healthier neural pathways.
And hey, this isn't just a cool theory. We're seeing it in actual clinical trials. A huge study from Johns Hopkins found that psilocybin, when paired with therapy, was incredibly effective at helping longtime smokers quit. Another survey found that many people with alcohol use disorder drank less or even stopped completely after a psychedelic experience. It just shows so much promise.
Okay, but this brings us to an absolutely crucial point. Psilocybin is not a magic pill. That open window of brain plasticity is totally useless unless you actually do the work to build something new in that space. So what could possibly motivate someone to do all that hard work? Profound personal insight. A landmark study back in 2006 found something just astonishing. The vast majority of people called their psilocybin experience one of the most meaningful events of their entire lives. For nearly a third, it was the single most important. It's that kind of deep, personal shift that really fuels the desire for lasting change. And that's exactly why, in a clinical setting, this isn't a free-for-all. It's a carefully structured process. It all starts with preparation, building trust with a therapist. Then comes the guided session itself, to ensure safety. But arguably the most important part is what comes after, integration therapy.
These are the sessions where you make sense of it all and turn those incredible insights into real, lasting change in your life.
All right, so let's zoom out a little bit. The promise here is obviously enormous, but what's the reality? Where does all this research actually stand today? Well, the field has come a long way. After basically being shut down for decades, research got the green light again in 2000. We had those key studies in 2006 and 2014 that really got the ball rolling. And then in 2021, this was a huge deal, the US government awarded the first federal grant for this kind of research in half a century. That signaled a massive shift.
And that shift has led to an absolute explosion of scientific interest. Just to give you an idea, by late 2023, there were 134 clinical trials involving psilocybin registered, looking at everything from depression to PTSD.
And yet, out of all that research, the number of psilocybin-based medicines that have actually received FDA marketing approval is 0.
And that contrast is so important to understand. As exciting as all this is, the road from a promising study to an approved, widely available medicine is incredibly long, it's expensive, and it's full of regulatory hurdles. We're still really in the early days of a very long journey.
Which really leaves us with the big question, right? We have this powerful tool that seems to offer a fundamental reset button for the addicted brain, opening a window for incredible change. The science is compelling, the potential is massive, but the path forward is complex. Could this idea of a guided reset really become a new way we treat addiction? The answer to that is going to unfold in labs and clinics over the next decade, and it could, quite literally, change millions of lives in the process.